Hello.
Yes, good afternoon. I was waiting for you to join.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Iram.
I know this is Iram, and this is MA second semester. The paper name is Introduction to Gender Studies, and this must be my fourth class that we're doing the background readings. And Iram, I think you have missed my classes, but fortunately, all classes have been recorded and they're on the department YouTube channel. You can have access to them, and this class is also on.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your highness. Thank you so much.
Iram, I would like you to switch on your camera if possible, so that
Yeah.
yeah, just make sure that this class is being recorded. Okay, so switch on your cameras. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh my God. Recorded, ma'am. No.
no, this class, all classes are being recorded now, so don't be
Oh.
shy or hesitant. Okay, I'm waiting for more students to come in, and I've been discussing patriarchy. All right, that is one of the
Yes, ma'am.
I have deliberated a lot on it previously, and Introduction to Gender Studies cannot be complete without a full-fledged discussion on patriarchy. And we've been looking at patriarchy from very, just what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to complicate matters for you, and we're going to get out of our oversimplified ideas of patriarchy as how, it being a man's world. So a lot of things were done in the previous lecture, and I just want to continue from there. I hope more students. Yes. So yes, it's only me basically. Yes, Iram, you will have to switch on your camera, please.
Ma'am, this time is not possible, ma'am.
Or you just put an image or something. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Next time I will do, ma'am. Definitely.
Okay. So can you just put an image in your phone for yourself so that. Anyways, so we were discussing patriarchal institutions, and after patriarchal institutions, and I told you that how it works as an institution, um, and how it is sustained and how it is reinforced. Okay, so appropriation of women's reproductive forces. This was also one of my important point of discussion, that how does this appropriation take place, that how are women's bodies controlled, right? So how does this happen? So the appropriation of women's reproductive forces and the control of their bodies and their sexuality, that women do not have control over their own bodies, right? So that comes from a very radical feminist you know thought process. So what happens is that, and I would like to talk about Lydia Falcon, who considers women as social economic class. And she insists that, it is the father or the husband who enforces the appropriation. Many feminists, such as Maria Mies and others, have also spoken of the productive between a husband and wife in a modern nuclear family, which is similar to the relationship between a supervisor and a subordinate in the workplace. So, and yesterday I also discussed about the wages for the housework campaign, and it was wages for the housework collective, which is part of the international feminist movement. And recently in India, we've had a similar thing being promised by one political party in the south. So this subordination occurs in the private space of family, and I was been telling you that the relationship is not on equal terms, and hence this subordination. And so because the subordination occurs in the private space of family, and because whatever the husband produces enters the market, which is the privileged area for capitalist patriarchy, so the wife's production, but the wife's production does not enter the market, which is whatever work that she does at home, the household chores. How it is always considered as either less productive or unproductive. In fact, it is unproductive or worthless. So in this way, all of the wife's work, whatever the woman, and when I use the word wife, I'm definitely implying on the whole system of family, and how the wives work then in the non-privileged private space of a nuclear family is actually invisibilized. It's an interesting word, how the patriarchy totally invisibilize the work of a woman or wife, as something absolutely worthless and unproductive. It's, as I was telling you yesterday, all this work that women do from the beginning, from the morning she gets up round the clock, till late at night, from cooking to menial chores and laundry and all other work that women does, is often is considered as no work at all. And um, and obviously they're not paid and hardly even recognized for it. So some aspects or elements of characteristics of modern patriarchy, if I'm supposed to look at, then it's interesting to note that patriarchy had beginning and therefore it has to have an end. So we have to look at it like that and not something which is natural and eternal. And the minute we talk in abstractions, we in some ways begin to accept it as it is. So one of the way of looking at it, as the feminists did, was to really break it down and see as something which is a social construct and not something which is divine and eternal and here to stay. So even if we still do not know exactly how it came into being, we do know that it came about after the egalitarian human organizing. So the earliest forms of patriarchy, I mean, if you really have to go to it, you can just see how the capitalism is related to patriarchy and how they both feed into each other. We also know that there are different models of patriarchy at different times in different culture, and this is also I discussed in my previous lecture, at different places, and how women are always. But one thing that remains constant and given is that women's role is always inferior. Biologically, women are considered as inferior. Physically, women are considered as inferior. Intellectually, so all this is interrelated. I give an example of how earlier it was thought that women's brain, scientifically thought that women's brain were like smaller than men. As a result, their inability to think and take decisions and all other things. So, in other words, patriarchy really does coexist with different forms of government. And I also discussed this, the socio-religious political organizing, such as the empires, the kingdom, theocracies, religion I discussed, and even democracies to some extent. So it can coexist, of course, with capitalism and even with socialism. So, um, and due to the globalization, today we have neoliberal capitalism. All existing patriarchies can be categorized as capitalist patriarchies, and it is true, as I've been telling you, that they both feed into each other. So, in all known patriarchy, of course, women are attributed negative meanings and their activities through symbols and rituals and myths and belief systems. I was discussing about Manusmriti. I also discussed about Sharia. So these symbols, these myths, they what do? They are different in different cultures, but one thing is that they do make a women, reductive and negative. They does attribute negative meanings to women, many of them. So patriarchy is again made up of structures. There are institutions. They exclude women from participation. And today we talk about women empowerment. We talk about inclusion. We talk about all these stakeholders. We talk about gendered budgeting. All these terms have come up because women have come together and raised concern, and these things are now slowly and gradually being recognized, but still it really is way far behind or what needs to be achieved. And also, especially when we talk about COVID and how if you go to the UN site and you see that how whatever work that was done in terms of the girl child education has really been gone like almost 10, 20, 30 decades, back in time, because it's mostly with the schools being shut, the women, mostly girl child, their education is as it is, it was difficult to get them to the school because of the cultural practices and lots of other intersectioning elements when it comes to our society. And now with the coronavirus and schools being shut, obviously whatever progress that was made in that regard has been disrupted, and we have kind of shifted many years back in time. So you see that you know um, exclusion of women is what I was talking about, and especially spaces of higher power and what is to be believed to be the space of the greatest power economically, politically, culturally, or religiously, you would see, you would never really find a woman. So despite the above, whatever that I have mentioned, women are not treated identically in patriarchy, nor are all women, of course, excluded in the same way from the spaces of power. In fact, if you look at it, there's a different treatment to the mechanism, by which there is lack of solidarity, and competitiveness among women is promoted. So this lack of solidarity, is something that really does escalate, some sort of, it the lack of solidarity perpetuates patriarchy in some way. Also, in the same way, it also promotes a mindset which is very hierarchical and sexualized thinking, the patriarchal mindset. And this mindset divides really into things, um, as I've been telling you, in those binary that we see as man and women, as good or bad. So, also things have been placed in the category of culture, and the stereotype. So by situating men and masculine under the higher category of culture, and what women and feminine is something which is less valued category of nature. So of course, then masculinity, or what does man stand for, becomes the parameter, it becomes the model, it becomes the paradigm for humanity. And I discussed this with you earlier also. It becomes an ideal against which everything else has to be measured, or it has to be kind of, judged. So the subordination of women is then also justified, has been justified, since time, you know, immemorial, based on their alleged, I would say alleged because it is not natural, it is not right, inferior, the roles that is there, that the nature has given them. And it's not really the nature, it is definitely, uh, it's definitely constructed in the society. And I also try to explain to you the constructedness of this whole narrative of patriarchy. Anyway, so this is a brief revision class with you guys. And then what else can I discuss with you? I believe, yeah. So, so we know that in patriarchy, gender roles and stereotypes may be different in each social class or age or culture. But through the mechanisms, structures, and institution mentioned, as I mentioned to you previously, it makes these roles and stereotypes seem natural and universal. So although different patriarchal setups are different because of the culture, variation, and religion, and a lot of other things, but it does but the mechanism, are the same. So there is variation in terms of society and class and culture and age, but the mechanism and the structures are pretty much the same. And what happens if the mechanism and the structures are the same under which they're operating? So it appears that these roles of women, of men or women, the stereotypes, they appear to be natural, they appear to be universal. So if you look at patriarchy, all men, will not enjoy the same privileges or have the same power. Indeed, the experiences of domination of men over women historically serve for some men to extend their domination over other groups of men, right? So you see that there is a hierarchy among men. Okay, that is more or less the same in every cultural religion. There always will be a hierarchy. The hierarchy is matlab who is at the, someone's more powerful than the other. A hierarchy, it's like a pyramid. So the male at the top of the patriarchal hierarchy obviously has a greater economic power, and it all does dilutes down to the economic power. It's an adult will almost always, he's able bodied and he possesses a well defined masculine gender identity है उनकी heterosexual identity है. That's another patriarchal presupposition that heteronormative aspect of it. So heterosexual identity hona is essential, and adding also, for example, any in any, for example, what can we say, in a given family, it's always the male, the father, who's the head and who takes decision. So across patriarchies, different models, women are exposed to different degrees and types of violence. So their degrees and their types of violence, some common to all, some are very commonplace. Well, some can be very specific to cultural and religious or the economic model that patriarchy has. Okay, and even the class matters a lot of difference. And I gave you this example yesterday when we were discussing how the lower class women, despite the fact that they're not so educated, they have more economic freedom in terms of the fact that they're almost always earning, you know because mostly men do not earn, men do not take the responsibility of the family, and you see that it's the women who come forward. And in the middle class, on the other hand, because of whatever restrictions that have the women, though educated, usually do not get into the labor market, and there has been a clear gap between the enrollment of the girl child in the universities and the schools, and then the same number of women are not to be found in the labor market, sorry, for jobs and opportunities. So this gap, it does translate down differently, in different class and in different culture. So also patriarchy was the first structure of domination, subordination. It's definitely exclusion, and it still remains a very basic system of domination. And ironically, while being the most powerful, and it is also the enduring, because it has endured, system of inequality, which is I think it's the best way of calling it is the inequality. Basically, a very unequal relationship between two people who probably work equally hard, and it is hardly ever perceived as such even by women themselves, and that is the the most revolting and the most damaging aspect of it. In fact, precisely because this invisibilization of patriarchy, it's one of its institution. Some people even deny that it exists. So this is just a brief recapitulation that I did of the unit, that patriarchy, that I've been discussing. If you have any doubt or discussion, if you have any doubt, you can ask me, Iram, or anyone else. And then I guess, you have any doubt, Iram? Do you want to ask anything? Yes, Iram, are you there? If you have any doubt, please, you can ask me any question right now. All right. So I suppose that would be the end of today's class, and I'm going to meet you all tomorrow. Okay, not tomorrow, obviously on Monday now,